Hi everyone, welcome, and today I'm going to show you how to use the Poliigon library with Cinema4D and the Octane renderer. Now, as you can see, I already have my basic scene set up, and I'm just going to go over here to the Octane dropdown and open up my live viewer window. Now at the moment we're not seeing anything, and that's because the information isn't being sent from Cinema4D to Octane, and the way that we do that is by going and clicking this button here. And cool, now we have a live interactive preview using the Octane renderer. But at the moment it's looking like a clay render, so we want to add some lighting. Now there are a couple ways that we can do that. We can go up here to Create, go down to Light and add an infinite light, then add an Octane tag to that. But that's a very cumbersome process, and fortunately everything that we need is actually inside the live viewer. So going over here to Objects, I'm going to create an Octane daylight. Refresh here. And there we go. So we're seeing the lighting affect the scene. However, it's very soft right now, and I want more of a directional sunlight hitting this. So making sure that the Octane daylight is selected. If I go over here and rotate on this axis, I can change it so that it looks more like daylight. And there we go. Now I'll just move my live viewer over here so it takes over the old one. And let's make a couple of adjustments to this. So making sure that we click the tag here for the Octane daylight. We'll get our settings down here for some additional controls. So if I want to change the strength of the light, I can adjust the power. If I want to change the orientation of the light, I can adjust the north offset. And the sun size right here will just make the shadow more soft. So the more I drag this up, the more soft it is. But harsh sunlight is usually very crisp, so I'll keep it to around there. Okay, now let's create our first materials. So again, there are a couple ways that we can do this. You can go down here to Create, go to Shader, C4D Octane, and create an Octane material. However, again, everything is conveniently built into the live viewer. So going over here to Materials, I'll create the first one, which will be a diffuse, and create another one which will be a glossy. Now the diffuse material I'll use for the ground plane, and I'll just click and drag this onto the plane so it's now applied, and then I'll take the glossy material and apply that to the sphere. So you can see the effect of the gloss happening now, the reflections. And double clicking the glossy material will open up the material editor. I'll just put that over there. Okay. So let's load our maps in. Now, this is going to be a bit backwards just so I can show you how the various maps work. First thing I'll do is change my diffuse color to black to make the effects much more obvious. And the first map I'll load in is the displacement. So clicking displacement, I'll click Add Displacement. Now, it's important that we use actual Octane map types. So make sure to click Displacement here. And then under Texture, I'm going to click this button, go down to C4D Octane, and I'm going to load in this image texture. Okay, now that that's loaded in, I'm going to load in my specific map. And it's going to be this 16-bit displacement. There you go, so we can see the effect happening immediately now. But it's kind of low res at the moment, and that's because in the settings here, the level of details is set to very low. At 256 by 256. Let's set to 1024. There we go. That's much better now. Now, the one other adjustment I might make is just to change the strength of the displacement. And right now it's set to 10 centimeters. And I'll just put it down to something more like 3, just so the effect isn't too strong, but still obvious. All right, so that's it for the displacement. Now, clicking Normal, we're going to add our normal map in. Remember again to click this, go down to C4D Octane, load in the image texture, click image texture, and then we're going to load in our map. So we're going to use this 16-bit normal here. All right, and that's it. So if I just zoom in a bit here, I'll turn off the displacement for a moment just so that we can see the normals affecting it correctly. Okay, and I'll just turn the displacement back on now. So now both are working in tandem. Now the other maps that we're going to load in are going to be the roughness, specular, and diffuse. So click here, roughness, Now again, remember this is very important, we want to load in the image texture for Octane. And make sure not to click this right here, but actually click image texture. And then that will bring us into the Octane map type. Now that we're in here, we can click this, and we want to open up the gloss map. Okay, now that the gloss map is loaded in, we're seeing that it's not looking correct, like it's looking very unreflective, and that's because we need to invert this map type. So going down here, click invert, and there we go. So now we can see that the map is working correctly. In certain areas it's more reflective and shiny, in others it's more rough. Okay, now the next map we're going to load in is the specular or reflection. Again, go over here, load in image texture, make sure to click image texture, and now we're going to load in the reflection map. And as you can see, it's looking pretty terrible, and again, that's because we need to invert this map. So go and invert right there, and there we go. So now we've loaded in the glossy and reflection map. And the only last map that we need to load in right now is going to be the color. So going over here to diffuse, go and load in an image texture, and we're going to load in the color map. And there we go. That's pretty much it for this material. Now the one last thing I could adjust is the Fresnel effect, and that will just increase the overall reflection. So if you go down here to index, you can adjust right there. Right now it's set to 1.3, and let's say you want the sphere to be a little more shiny, you could push it up maybe, I'd say at most 1.5, 1.6. You don't want it to be too reflective. I mean, it depends on your scene, of course, but I think the sweet spot is around 1.4. Okay, now let's go about adding a surface imperfection overlay texture on top of this tiles material. Now again, there are a couple ways of doing this, but I'm going to go with the most effective way. So go up here to materials and create a new diffuse material. I'm just going to call this overlay. And I'm going to create another material, and it's going to be an Octane mix material. Okay, so I'm going to take my mix material now, drag it into the sphere, and replace the tiles. And now over here in the controls, this is where we're going to input the two materials. So the first one is going to be the overlay, material 1, and then the second is going to be the tiles. So I'll take my overlay, drag it into material 1, and take my tiles to material 2. And now we're seeing both at the same time, and that's because if we click the float texture here, we can see it's set to a value of 0.5. So if I was to drag the slider, you'll see it's blending between both. But of course I want this to be an image that's going to be driving the opacity of the overlay. So I'll go and load an image texture. Make sure to click image texture. And I'm going to be using this image right here, which is a primarily black image, but the details on top are white. Alright, so immediately we see the effect happening. Now, let's say we want to adjust some of these strength values. So over here, we could go to power, and let's say we want to make it a lot stronger. So I'll change it from 1 to 10. There we go, it's way stronger now. But we can tweak it further by adjusting things like the gamma. So if I drag the slider here, you can see we're actually increasing the contrast. And that can be very handy for just making some minute adjustments so that you can do it on the fly instead of having to adjust the actual image itself. So let's go with something like this, as the effect is just really obvious. Okay, some other things that we can do is actually go and change the UV coordinates and scaling. So if you click UV transform, that will open up all these options down here. Now what I'm going to do is click the lock aspect ratio. And then this section here will essentially change the scaling. So if I just drag this one slider, I'll drag it down. We can see the effect is tiling now, but obviously it's way too small. So you just want to adjust this level until the details match the sizing of your object. All right, so I'll just go with something like that for now. It's just a demonstration. You can adjust the overall positioning as well down here along the X and the Y axis. And just tweak it till it looks good to you. All right, and that's pretty much it for overlays. It's very simple and a very powerful way of doing it. Now, the reason I used a mixed material is because we want to take advantage of displacements. Now, if I was to go back to my original glossy material here, if I click my displacement on or off, you'll see that nothing is happening. And that's because it actually doesn't use the displacement on the original tiles material. So they actually did make a fix for that. So if I go back down to the mixed material, there's a place right here to use displacement. So click that, click add displacement. Make sure to click on the displacement right here. Then we're going to add an image texture in here. And I'm going to go back to my tiles material, load the 16-bit displacement. And there we go. So now just displace outwards. So I can adjust this. I'll set the details again to 1024. There. So now it's quite clear. And there we go. So we've got our cool material here. I could even take this material, the mixed material, drag it onto the plane, for instance. You can see it on a flat plane. So yeah, this is a very powerful way of working. I really love surface imperfections. They just add so much extra to your scene, and definitely advisable to use them as much as possible. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.